Okay, so there are some stories in the Bible you feel like you know inside and out, right? The story of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath is definitely one of them. It's a classic tale of faith in the face of impossible odds. But what if the way we've always heard it kind of misses the real point? Let's dig in and uncover what might be the hidden meaning here.
So let's set the scene. First, you have our main guy, the prophet Elijah. He's on the run, he's starving, and it's all happening during a massive famine that, get this, he himself called for. And who is he sent to for help? Not a king, not a wealthy landowner, but a widow who isn't even an Israelite. And when I say she's desperate, I mean she is at the absolute end of her rope, literally preparing one last tiny meal for herself and her son before they just lie down and die.
So you have these two figures, a desperate prophet and a starving widow, brought together right on the brink of death. And yeah, miracles happen. We all know that part. But what is the author of this story actually trying to get across? I think the answer is about way more than just a simple lesson in having faith.
All right, so first, let's do a super quick recap of the story from 1 Kings 17, just to make sure we're all on the same page. God sends Elijah to this town, Zarephath. He finds the widow, asks her for food, and she basically says, look, I've got just enough flour and oil for one last little cake, and that's it. And what does Elijah say? He tells her to feed him first. It's a bold move, but he promises her that if she does, her supplies won't run out.
And believe it or not, she does it. And that's when the first miracle happens. Her jar of flour and her jug of oil, they just never go empty. But then things take a dark turn. Her son gets sick, and he dies. So Elijah prays over the boy, and then we get the second, even more incredible miracle. He brings the boy back to life. So, when we hear this story, what do we usually take away from it? Well, typically all the focus lands squarely on the characters, right? It's all about the moral lessons we can learn from how they acted.
Yeah, a really common interpretation, which is summed up perfectly by this commentator, F.B. Meyer, is that God chose this specific widow because she was special. You know, she had some sparks of heroism or an incredible faith that set her apart from all the other widows back in Israel.
And this kind of thinking leads to a whole list of personal, very human-centered takeaways. We're told we should learn from her about being content when things are tough, or about being gentle. And these are all good things, for sure, but notice how they all focus on us and our behavior. It's what you might call a very anthropocentric reading of the text.
But here's the big question. What if focusing on the widow's amazing character or Elijah's powerful faith is like admiring a really beautiful picture frame while completely missing the masterpiece painting inside? What if this story is actually about something much, much bigger?
This is where we get to the key that unlocks this whole narrative. It's a massive theological idea that scholars call the principle of replacement.
So what is that exactly? Well, the principle is this. At certain key moments in history, when God's chosen people, Israel, reject his message, the blessings and the privileges of that covenant relationship get offered to people on the outside, to the outsiders.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't some new idea. Hundreds of years after this happened, Jesus himself stood up in a synagogue and used this exact story to make this very point. He specifically pointed out that during that terrible famine, God intentionally bypassed all the widows in Israel to show his favor to this one particular outsider.
Okay, so once you have this principle of replacement in your mind, the whole story starts to light up with clues you might have missed before. Let's just look at three of the biggest ones. First up, clue number one, the location. Think about where Elijah is sent. It's not just some random town. He's sent to Zarephath, which is in the region of Sidon. Now, why does that matter? Because Sidon was the hometown of Queen Jezebel, the person who was actively trying to hunt down and kill all of God's prophets. He was sent directly into the heart of enemy territory, the symbolic center of all opposition to God at the time.
All right, clue number two, the demand Elijah makes. For centuries, God's covenant demand on Israel was for them to offer the first fruits of their harvest, to give the very first and best part to show that everything came from him. Now, look what's happening. That same all-or-nothing demand is being placed on this outsider, but it's ratcheted up to the extreme. She has to give not her first, but her last meal. It's like the covenant demand itself has literally been relocated.
And now for our third and honestly most stunning clue. The miracle of raising the widow's son from the dead. That's not just another miracle. It is the very first recorded resurrection from death in the entire Bible. The first one ever.
So we have to ask the question, why? Why would this foundational, world-changing miracle, the demonstration of power over death itself, happen for the very first time not among God's chosen people, but in the house of a Gentile, in the homeland of their greatest enemy? The only answer that really makes sense is the principle of replacement. God is making a powerful statement that His word, which was rejected by Israel, is now moving out and doing powerful things among the nations.
So, when we just take a step back, we can see two fundamentally different ways to read and understand this story.
The first way, that human-centered reading, it gives us some nice moral lessons about good people. And that's valuable, but it's a small story. The second way, the God-centered reading, reveals a massive, tectonic shift in God's cosmic plan. The story isn't just about a faithful widow anymore. It's about the very Word of God leaving a disobedient nation and finding a new home, proving that its power doesn't depend on any single group of people.
And that leaves us with a really powerful thought to chew on. Sometimes, the point of a story isn't about the virtue of the characters in it, but about the grand intention of the author behind it all. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories that we think we know so well would change completely if we just learned how to look for that bigger picture?